real party before. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The party was at some rich kid's house with no parents home. I parked Andy by the pool and went to get us drinks. When I came back 5 minutes later, a group of football players were standing around him laughing. One of them was holding Andy's oxygen tube. That's when I saw Andy shaking violently in his chair and smelled the unmistakable scent of Mary Jane coming from his oxygen tank. I lunged forward and ripped the oxygen tube from Braxton's hand, while Andy's face was turning purple. The tube hissed as clean air started flowing again, but Andy kept shaking bad. I screamed for someone to call 911 while the football players just stood there laughing like this was some big joke. Braxton was still holding his joint and grinning at me like he'd done something clever. I grabbed his Letterman jacket with both hands and shoved him backward as hard as I could. He went straight into the pool with a huge splash while I dropped to my knees next to Andy. The smoke was still hanging around his face, so I waved my hands trying to clear it away. His body kept jerking in these scary spasms and his lips looked blue even in the pool lights. The other players backed away when they saw Braxton thrashing in the water. I kept one hand on Andy's shoulder to steady him while yelling that Braxton was going to jail for this. Someone must have actually called because I heard sirens getting closer. The paramedics rushed through the backyard gate with their equipment bags and went straight to Andy. They put a new oxygen mask on his face and checked his pulse while asking me what happened. I explained about the smoke in his oxygen line while they loaded him onto a stretcher. They moved fast but careful, keeping his head stable while wheeling him to the ambulance. I climbed in the back with them and held Andy's hand while one paramedic started an IV. My hands were shaking as I called Janet from my phone. She answered on the second ring sounding happy until she heard my voice crack. I told her Andy was on the way to the hospital and something bad happened at the party. She said they'd meet us there and hung up. The paramedic kept checking Andy's oxygen levels and writing stuff on a clipboard. Andy's eyes were closed, but he squeezed my hand a little, which made me feel better. At the hospital, they rushed him straight through the emergency room doors while I had to stay in the waiting area. I paced back and forth in my blue prom dress, feeling sick to my stomach. Other people stared at me, but I didn't care. Professor Clayton and Janet burst through the doors about 10 minutes later looking terrified. Janet ran straight to me and pulled me into this tight hug even though I felt like this was all my fault. She kept asking if I was okay while Professor Clayton went to the desk demanding information about Andy. A police officer showed up and asked me to give a statement about what happened. I sat down with him in a corner and told him everything I could remember. I gave him Braxton's full name and described exactly how he was holding the oxygen tube when I found them. The officer wrote everything down and asked for other witness names. I listed every person I recognized from the party, even if I wasn't sure they saw what happened. My phone started going crazy with notifications from kids who were at the party. Someone had already posted a video that showed part of what happened by the pool. You could see Braxton standing over Andy's wheelchair and hear people laughing in the background. I screenshot everything before it could disappear, my fingers shaking as I saved each image and video. More messages kept coming in, some asking if Andy was okay, and others calling me dramatic. I ignored the mean ones and kept saving anything that looked like evidence. The officer gave me his card and said a detective would probably want to talk to me later. After what felt like forever, a nurse came out to talk to us. Her name tag said Gita Mercado, and she had this calm way of talking that made me feel less panicked. She explained that forcing pot smoke through Andy's oxygen line could have caused serious respiratory failure. His lungs were already weak and the smoke could have shut down his breathing completely. She said I acted fast, which probably saved him from worse damage. Andy would need to stay for monitoring for at least 24 hours to make sure his oxygen levels stayed stable. Janet started crying with relief that he was going to be okay. We all sat in these uncomfortable plastic chairs while Professor Clayton filled out insurance paperwork. After a while, Janet asked if she could talk to me alone in the hallway. We found a quiet spot near the vending machines where she told me she'd had doubts about the party. She wanted Andy to have normal teenage experiences, but her gut told her it was a bad idea. Her voice cracked when she said she should have trusted her instincts. I told her this wasn't her fault at all,